It's an unimaginable act of inhumanity. A gunman walks into an elementary school, pulls out 2 handguns and starts shooting, killing as many as 26 people, including 20 children between the ages of 5 and 10. I'm Emily Rooney. Welcome to a special edition of Beat the Press. Tonight, we are devoting the entire half hour to the tragic shooting in Connecticut. Our panel of Beat the Press experts will weigh in both from the perspective of journalists and regular people. I'm joined here by Dan Kennedy of Northeastern University, WGBH's Kelly Crossley, Kara Miller, also of WGBH, and author and journalist Roy Harris. Well, I'll be the first to admit that when I heard there was a shooting at a school in Newtown, Connecticut, I didn't give it much thought. It was another random act of gun violence, much like the shooting in an Oregon mall earlier this week. This, of course, was to become much more. While the shooting took place around 9:30 this morning, the magnitude was not known until hours later. 20 children, 6 adults, gunned down by a man named Adam Lanza, said to be a troubled 20-year-old whose mother was a teacher at the school and was one of his murder victims. Media rushed to the scene where TV cameras caught these heartrending pictures of children holding each other's hands, seeking a safe haven.
There's 20 parents that were just told that their children are dead. It was awful.
It goes without saying that the magnitude of this shooting makes it a big story. In media parlance, a tipping point, the ill-defined line that transforms a story into a national tragedy.
The 2 guys who were the Trenchcoat Mafia came into the library and were just shooting everyone that they could.
It happened in 1999 when 12 children and a teacher were murdered at Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado. It happened again at Virginia Tech in 2007 when a gunman killed 32 fellow students. And then this past summer, the awful shooting in a theater in Aurora, Colorado, leaving 12 dead and 58 injured.
There is a day for discussion of the usual Washington policy debates, but I don't think today is that day.
Or is it? Several high-profile journalists weighed in on the issue of gun control via Twitter today. Brian McGrory, enough with the insipid condolence calls between pals. We need stronger gun control laws. Piers Morgan, no more Weasley words of comfort, Mr. President. This is the latest and worst gun outrage on your watch.
Our current gun culture, Whitlock wrote, ensures that more and more domestic disputes will end in the ultimate tragedy.
Veteran sportscaster Bob Costas was vilified for weighing in on gun control 2 weeks ago after Kansas City Chief linebacker Joe Van Belcher shot himself and his girlfriend to death. Now he seems prescient. Now, though, the issue for the media, one of taste.
Our hearts are so filled with sadness right now, and it's only going to get worse as we get more details. And just imagine, Brooke, once we start seeing the pictures of these dead little kids, it's going to be an awful
what to show and how to show it. Body bags holding 5-year-olds. Tiny caskets to come. I was sitting here this morning when I was reading the newspaper at home, and I opened up the paper and I saw the picture of the 2 victims from Oregon earlier this week, and I thought, geez, I really haven't paid any attention to that. It was just another random mall shooting, and I hate to say it, only 2 people. But when I looked at those 2 people, one a young man, one a middle-aged woman, I thought, it just struck me. I said, wow, that could have been me. It could have been somebody I knew. But it's about as far as I went with it. Same thing this morning when we first heard that there was a shooting in Newtown, Connecticut. It didn't really strike me that this would be anything more than another shooting, and hopefully I thought it wasn't going to be a deadly one. And it really was hours later that we heard the magnitude of it. And you know, we always, it's in all of us, not just journalists. I think everybody does this. You start comparing it to other tragedies. I remembered one in Scotland that happened in 1996 where a gunman killed 12 kindergartners. This is very similar to that one, and that became a national news story in America because it was kindergartners. And then we start rolling out all these other ones like Littleton, and then I thought, well, for some reason, even the Gabrielle Gifford one didn't quite rise to this level because, well, it was only 6 people, and it probably wouldn't have gotten any attention were it not the fact that it was a United States congressperson because it was a political rally. You know, it's human nature to do that, but there is something, and I think of all of us, that we all know when a story rises to that level where it's just tremendous. And this is it.
I think people are going to see this as being the worst thing that's happened in this country since 9/11, frankly. And I think it's largely because of the age of the victims and, of course, the sheer number of them. And it hits home for people in so many ways. I mean, my God, I picked my daughter up from college yesterday. My wife works in an elementary school. And everybody has stories like that. And so the horror is just driven home in ways that we haven't seen even with some of these other terrible shootings. So I think that this is going to be very much the #1 news story for many, many days to come, if not weeks, and I think it should be.
You know, you talk about a tipping point, and I think I worry a little bit that we are getting inured to this kind of stuff. In fact, the worse things get. You mentioned the Virginia Tech massacre, 32 people, or Columbine, which was 12 students and a teacher, and now you look back and you think, wow, by comparison, 12 and a teacher doesn't seem like that many people. And I worry that our bar keeps getting higher and higher. Now it has to be young kids. I mean, it has to be so many people, heart-wrenching. And it also stops us, I think, from paying attention to places where there's a culture of violence. Chicago has seen a terrible year this year with murders, but we don't pay any attention to that because we just write it off as, well, that's urban violence. And that's what concerns me, is that it has to be the kind of thing where you think, oh my God, I'm sending my kid to school, and I thought that was a safe thing to do, and maybe it isn't. Whereas there's a real pervasiveness of this issue that I just don't think gets touched on nearly enough.
I don't think it's a situation where we're saying we're going to get there. We're already there.
Yeah.
The morning after the Oregon shooting, I got up anxiously to see what would be reported, and I kept flipping and I watch all the morning, a mention. And people were on to Fiscal Cliff. Yeah. I mean, it didn't even warrant like a minute. And I personally was horrified by that, because not only was it the random nature of it, I thought, in a mall, it couldn't be more American. It couldn't be more seasonal. It couldn't be more normal for this guy to have walked in to that scene and shot people and come out. And it just set me back on my heels. And I was frankly appalled that as media, it didn't get much pickup at all. I just mentioned it earlier today. I said, I don't remember anybody talking about it the second day.
Are you talking about the Oregon?
The Oregon Mall.
No, Oregon, yeah.
Yeah, the Oregon Mall shooting that just happened.
Yeah, I know. I admit it.
I was stunned that it did not get any attention. So there are decisions being made about where the tipping point is, and it clearly is numbers, and it's always been, if it's a young kid, it's going to get more attention. I mean, I understand all of that, but to me, the Oregon shooting was so normal in its situation that it should have had a greater resonance.
The 5 to 10-year-olds is the key for me. The image that really stays with me is of these children talking and being interviewed, and you can have a whole debate about whether they should even be interviewed here. Parents were there, but the children were so focused on what had happened. It was you would talk to the parents, and the parents would kind of break into the normal things about how horrible, how terrible. The kids were focused on the pop, 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 on someone falling. It was heartrending to hear how they were like little reporters. It was an amazing thing, and that's the image that sticks with me from these
and the
survivors.
second disturbing thing about all this, I mean, not second, there's so many disturbing, but we are instantly going to turn our attention to the shooter. Originally, they had his name as Ryan Lanza, then he switches to Adam Lanza. I'm not sure which it is, but they're brothers. One's 20, one's 24. Gerald Lee Loeffner. Now, that's a name that just rolls off my tongue. Gabrielle Giffords, she was also shot, but I couldn't name you another person. I know there was a 6-year-old shot that day, but I don't remember her name. And I feel the same. Even the guy in Aurora, his name was Holmes. That's all I remember, but I don't remember their names, which is awful. But I mean, the media does this too. They don't, we will see the pictures of those children. We will know their names, but we will be focusing on the shooter.
But it's inevitable. There's only one of the shooter, and in the case of Columbine, there's two, and there's so many
but we
victims.
know their names, so we don't. No, we should be able to name some of the victims.
I'm sure they will name them, but it's very hard.
We should remember them.
I know. But we were talking about this earlier today as all this was unfolding in the newsroom, and I brought up the Charles Stewart case, and that happened so long ago in Boston, but it was this horrendous murder. But you remember both the perpetrator and the victim because you could focus, right? There, in these situations now, the bar, we were talking about Columbine, that was 12 people who were, and a teacher, 12 kids and a teacher. I don't even know how much that would capture the popular imagination. Now, it would to some degree, but I think we've gotten to such incredible numbers that we've become used to in these kinds of mass shootings. I worry about what's happened to us and what it takes to cross that bar.
Well, in the next few days, you will certainly be seeing all kinds of details about individual families and individual children. There will certainly be a lot of attention. Right now, it just seems hideous. It seems like, the statues in front of Oklahoma City where the bombing was, you think of it as a monument. But in the next few days, we're going to have truly heartrending individual stories.
We are, and I want to say a word of defense in focusing on the shooter, because we certainly don't want to glorify these shooters, and unfortunately I think that we do end up doing that to some extent just by the relentless focus on them. And yet we want to know everything we can about why they did this horrible thing. And I know I do. I want to know as much as I can about whoever this shooter was. And we're going to get a lot of details about that in the days to come. And as a result, this gets imprinted on your memory much more than any of the victims.
I know, but there's also the danger of then elevating them to almost heroic status in a sense. I mean, Klebold and Harris in Littleton.
I agree completely.
The trench coat mafia, and then there were copycat trench coat mafia, and it turns out there was no trench coat mafia, and yet we were all a part of that, of the vernacular that kind of catapulted them to that status, and
and you're right. And I do think that in the days ahead, I would like those people in the media who are covering this story to think about what some of the real experts are saying. People like my Northeastern colleagues, Jack Levin and James Allen Fox. What kind of coverage is more likely to produce future shooters? What coverage is less likely to produce future shooters? I think that we're on shaky ground here, and we have to do this in a responsible way, but I still want to know as much as I can about the shooter.
Oh, well, come on. There would be no responsibility if the local enforcement agencies right at this moment haven't been as firm as they have been about what you can shoot and what you can't shoot and what I'm going to tell you and what I'm not. Even down to the doctor in one of the hospitals who said, I am just not going to discuss some of this. I mean, that's what stops people. I'm not saying that there's not some other information that should be happening, but people are going to cross the line. And I have to say, Roy, I'm not so comfortable about those kids, even with the parents being there. And the reason they're so focused, because it's imprinted on their brain. And it's imprinted on their brain, and it's never going to leave. And I think that's something that we have to think about from a psychological standpoint. They may be good little reporters in this moment, but my God, they're going to carry that moment with them forever. And I think repeating it helps it be carried forward in your mind. I just think it's terrible.
Well, the media has to be careful too, because it's like I found myself wanting to know everything right away today, and I got frustrated too when the storyline started changing, and then there's reports about the governor, talking to the parents, but with the governor is getting briefed from the police, and I thought, well, that's an odd position to put the governor in, and yet the media wasn't being informed in the same way. I mean. And then everybody wants to know. It's we're the media, but everybody listening there wanted to know a little bit more. And it came out in such officialdom. It was almost like cold and detached, which I also found irritating. I mean, and then the perpetrator. It's like, just.
Well, they have to do that so they can, actually keep down the rising level of hysteria, I think, in media and reporters. I actually think that they do us a service by being detached in that moment so that there's not more hysteria attached to it than already is there. I mean, it's pretty bad as it is. You don't need to go any further with pumping it up. And, when you have the kind of scenario that we had with those parents rolling up to that school not knowing if their child was dead or alive, it just doesn't get any more powerful than that.
What about the issue of instantly jumping on some of the social issues, like the culture of violence, gun control? I mean, I couldn't believe how many journalists, including CBS's Bob Schieffer, weighed in on the issue of taking gun control more seriously. I mean, as we've discussed here, it didn't come up in the presidential campaign.
No.
These things only get discussed in the wake of some terrible tragedy like this. And then you have somebody like Jay Carney saying, today, he said, today is not the right day. Of course it is the right day. Maybe not in the same piece that you're doing the story about the tragedy there, but yes, it is. When else are you going to talk about it? 4 weeks from now, when, hate to say it, we will have moved on?
Jay Carney was following the old rules. I think the rules changed with this shooting. I think that the initial reaction was naturally, well, it would be disrespectful to drag gun control and all these other issues into it. I think people are so upset and so angry about this that they want to talk about it right now. They don't want to wait.
But I also think there's, and timing is everything. The fact that Aurora, even if we've moved on in the press, really just happened a minute ago. The fact that Oregon happened just a week. I mean, it's great. Last week. I mean, all of this cumulative shootings together really make, and the Jovan Belcher shooting as well, that it's not the same kind of thing, but still has really left it from the outside. It looks like every day there's a mass shooting or some kind of crazy shooting going on in America, and what's going on here.
And when you look at the way that these people are armed, it's part of the story. I mean, when you think about the guy who dressed up and went into the Aurora, Colorado movie theater, or the guy today, the reports are so far that he had a Bushmaster automatic rifle, a Glock, and a pistol. That's a lot for one person, and these are really heavy duty. This is not going out and seeing if you can get a squirrel or a deer kind of weapons that he has. And so it's interesting. I think when Hurricane Sandy came and Chuck Todd said, I think that we have to start speaking differently about global warming as the media. He got jumped on a certain amount. But I wonder, and you mentioned Bob Schieffer, I wonder if that is going to start happening now. Inevitably, that is part of the story. Yeah. The notion that guns don't kill people, people kill people. Oh, yeah. Well, people kill people with guns. I mean, so I don't,
The other part of this is, how we entertain ourselves. The new Quentin Tarantino movie has just come out, and it's gotten rave reviews. It's actually chock full of violence, ABC and CBS, who are going to be covering this story at length tonight. I mean, they do, CSI and Criminal Minds and all those. That's what that means. Some of the most violent, bizarre stuff. So they're promoting it. They're selling it as entertainment on one hand, and then covering it with these somber voices at the others. It's all.
Yes, and how about the video games, Black Ops, and all of the various, iterations of it?
Well, maybe liberals and conservatives can get together here, because a lot of liberals would like to see tougher gun laws, and a lot of conservatives would like to see some of the violence out of entertainment media. So maybe both will happen.
The way this story is going to be covered, obviously, is going to be in segments. The groups that are going to come down are already down here from Hartford Courant, close by. I tend to be more of a print newspaper oriented person. The New York Times will be there in force, and there'll be reporters covering different segments of this. So one person will be looking at gun control, but other people will be looking at the families, will be looking at the effect on the community. We're going to see so many angles of this story that I think that's what we'll remember, is that it's multifaceted.
I mean, the issue that always spills out within a day or two, or sometimes the same day, is the mental well-being and health of the individual. I mean, you look at that Gerald Lee Loeffner. I hate to keep going back to him, but he looks crazy. And we won't know with this young man because he's dead. We'll never really know. I mean, what was going on there, but nobody of right mind. But it's not a popular thing to say. It's almost like it doesn't matter if you had mental health issues. It's set aside, and yet it's one of those lingering social issues that kind of.
Well, I think in this case, we have some early evidence that there may be some domestic,
it sounds like he might have killed his father too, because there's another body in a house nearby.
A lot of angry, depressed young men with mental illness out there. Not too many of them do something like this.
That's right, and I don't think you can lock all of them up, which brings us back to the gun debate, because I think there's going to have to be some very thoughtful reporting done on, sure, we can look at violence in the media and we can look at people disliking their parents, but you also have to look at per capita gun violence all around the world, and people in Japan and Australia and France also watch violent movies, and they also have issues with their parents, and you just have to look at
But their numbers are down, is your
their
point.
numbers are nothing compared to our per capita gun violence. So some of it is being mentally disturbed, yes, and then being able to go out and buy a Glock.
Ireland is a depressed country at this point. I mean, they look at us and say, what are you people doing? How do you tolerate this kind of a...
Well, because part of it is access, and I just think that, you got a sense during the president's press conference, a hint that he was going to start thinking about this, but it is something that has to be talked about, and we have to figure out, where we're going to go with this.
All right, well, the people were calling for the president to speak right away. So at 3:15 this afternoon, President Obama did speak from the White House. His comments were some of the most affecting ever to come from a president. We're going to bring them to you in their entirety.
I offered Governor Malloy my condolences on behalf of the nation and made it clear he will have every single resource that he needs to investigate this heinous crime, care for the victims, counsel their families. We've endured too many of these tragedies in the past few years, and each time I learn the news, I react not as a president, but as anybody else would, as a parent. And that was especially true today. I know there's not a parent in America who doesn't feel the same overwhelming grief that I do. The majority of those who died today were children. Beautiful little kids between the ages of 5 and 10 years old. They had their entire lives ahead of them. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, kids of their own. Among the fallen were also teachers, men and women who devoted their lives to helping our children fulfill their dreams. So our hearts are broken today for the parents and grandparents, sisters and brothers of these little children, and for the families of the adults who were lost. Our hearts are broken for the parents of the survivors as well. For as blessed as they are to have their children home tonight, they know that their children's innocence has been torn away from them too early, and there are no words that will ease their pain. As a country, we have been through this too many times. Whether it's an elementary school in Newtown, or a shopping mall in Oregon, or a temple in Wisconsin, or a movie theater in Aurora, or a street corner in Chicago, these neighborhoods are our neighborhoods, and these children are our children. And we're going to have to come together and take meaningful action to prevent more tragedies like this, regardless of the politics. This evening, Michelle and I will do what I know every parent in America will do, which is hug our children a little tighter, and we'll tell them that we love them, and we'll remind each other how deeply we love one another. But there are families in Connecticut who cannot do that tonight, and they need all of us right now. In the hard days to come, that community needs us to be at our best as Americans, and I will do everything in my power as president to help. Because while nothing can fill the space of a lost child or loved one, all of us can extend a hand to those in need, to remind them that we are there for them, that we are praying for them, that the love they felt for those they lost endures not just in their memories, but also in ours. May God bless the memory of the victims. And in the words of Scripture, heal the brokenhearted, and bind up their wounds.
You know, watching the journalists and the president today, there was just no pretense. There were no tough guys. There were nobody who was just out there kind of doing their job with a straight face. Virtually nobody. Watching, flipping around to all the cable channels and the networks today, and the president, I think, captured the moment. You know, I've never seen anything like that. As a matter of fact, Wolf Blitzer and the CNN team were all saying that they've never seen a president so overcome with emotion. I mean, you've seen it before. You've seen it in some of those services for military, and President Clinton in particular, I remember once, but I don't think I've ever seen anything this personal quite like that.
Amazing, though, what he said was that we have to take action.
Yeah, he did say it.
We have to take action to prevent tragedies like this. I mean, talk about setting the stage for something to come. That's probably got a lot of people worried and a lot of people feeling good about it, that something could come of it.
I think that was a moment that really elevated him, and I think it was a moment that probably reflected what so many people were feeling as they logged on, you know, to Twitter, or they watched it on TV, or they listened to it on the radio. I worry, though, that that was a moment of elevation, and that's not what we're going to see going forward. That's the sort of lofty point, and things will deteriorate from here as the debate goes on.
They always do.
Yeah.
I don't think so, because after the shooting of Gabrielle Giffords and the other folks in Arizona, the president gave one of the most moving speeches of his presidency a week or so later, I think. And I think that this was basically his first draft at responding, and I think that we're going to hear more from him in the days and weeks to come. And I'm not even talking about policy, although he clearly signaled that. I just mean something that puts this in a broader context, rather than just the very emotional and very moving reaction that he had as a father.
And when you know that he's a guy that really tries to keep stuff in, to just see him fighting that. I was listening initially on the radio, and when this long pause, I flipped on the TV going, oh my God, is he crying? I mean, I just couldn't, you know, it was so moving. It just got to me, and I think everybody's right. It really drew us all together around those families, and made us just reflect on what it means. I kept thinking about those parents coming there and not having a kid.
To Kara's point, I hope he can continue this, because this is one of those stories that, frankly, there's no objectivity involved. It's just not one side and the other. Even on the gun thing, I mean, there's no one side versus the other on whether that guy should have had guns or access to guns or the type of guns he had for the most part. How can you argue that? This is one of those ones where, you know, the false equivalency test can be put forward. It's like there's no yin and yang. It just doesn't exist.
How many stories can you say that the reporters on the scene have never seen anything like this, unless they were somehow hiding at My Lai or something and saw something, the innocent slaughtered.
And they didn't even see it. I mean, only the police did. All right. Well, thank you all for that tonight. And that is our special Beat the Press. If you'd like to comment on tonight's program or the tragedy in Connecticut, please go to beatthepress.org. Coming up next is a special Basic Black, providing comfort and healing to the survivors of gun violence by a group that knows it all too well, our Black ministers. That's next on Basic Black. For all of us, I'm Emily Rooney. Good night.